Hi, I'm Gary Donatelli. This is my friend Dennis Downs.
Hello.
We went to high school together. Dennis is an artist and I'm a documentarian. And when he called me one day to say that he was going to do a sculpture of a 16-foot tall tree, I thought he had finally lost his mind. But he went on to explain that this was a very special tree. It was a Native American trail marker, and that there were indeed many of them around the country. And it was a passion that he had since he was young to learn more about these trees and their importance to the Americas. And he has finally culminated all this work into a beautiful book called
Native American Trail Marker Trees, Marking Paths Through the Wilderness. It was published by Neil Samros.
And we'd like to take this book, and we'd like everyone in the world to have a copy of it. But being that we can't do that, we thought that maybe the next step would be to make a documentary and a web page containing some of the information from this book.
The trail marker trees were actually trees that the Native Americans in this country shaped while they were young. In other words, bending them so that they could identify these trees as being shaped by them, and they were placed along known Native American trails to give them a trigger, like an exit sign off of our main highways. In other words, when they would see the trail marker tree, they would know this is where I leave the trail temporarily to find a freshwater spring or an exposed mineral deposit that they had been taught, and taken to, by their grandfather and their father. In other words, the information was passed on, that when they saw these trees, they knew what they were for. They could bring them around a large swamp. They could take them to an area of medicinal plants. They could take them back to burial mounds and sacred mounds, council circles. So in other words, it's a concept of, while they knew in general where they were always going, they needed these trail marker trees to be permanent markers that they could use. You got to remember, they're walking constantly. The landscape is monotonous. These are thick, dense forests. So you would need something in your mind to trigger, this is where we get off to get this. This is where we leave the trail to get this. And by doing that with trees, there was less of a chance of somebody moving something that you left to mark the trail, or say a paint that could wash off over a certain amount of time. Once the trees were shaped, they'd last for centuries. This is a tree that was located outside of Lake Forest, West Lake Forest, near Mattawa. And it was a really well photographed tree by several trail marker tree researchers going back to 1911. Bess Dunn included it in her photographic study of trees throughout Lake and Cook County. Later by Raymond Jansen, the botanist who traveled to 13 states, and we have photographs of him posing next to the tree. And finally James Getz, who actually became the first mayor of Mattawa.
How did you first learn of the trail marker tree system?
I learned about the trail marker tree system down on the shore of Lake Michigan in Illinois. An older gentleman took the time when I was approximately 12 years old to explain what the trees were. And I was standing in front of one. And later I was also re-educated about the trees by the Boy Scouts. My mother was a den mother. Actually it was Cub Scouts and then Boy Scouts. And then by my own Native American relative. So by the time I was a teenager, I already had a pretty good understanding of what they were for, and I just kept trying to always look for them, always talk to older people about it, and just started accumulating knowledge about them from every source I could.
Mm-hmm.
What we're looking at here is an advertisement for an anniversary in Wilmette, Illinois, but it was based on an actual map from 1828 through 44. And what's on the map that's unique is the actual drawings of known trail marker trees that lasted into the 1980s and were recorded and photographed for over 100 years. You can see the pictures, the hand drawings here, and the actual locations of the trail marker trees marked on the map. And the cartographer includes in the legend the Indian trail trees. In this part of the country, the knowledge of this was passed on directly from the Native Americans to the pioneers and settlers.
What has the reaction been from the Native American community?
The Native Americans that I've worked with on the project has been totally positive. I don't see why there would be any reason for it, for it not to be. So these are all really significant, and it's nice to have the photos be able to be matched with historical records going back, almost 200 years.
Yes.
So couldn't be happier.
I'm happy
you.
that you're happy, I mean,
And,
why shouldn't I be happy about this? Because
So this is the tree that your father would have been next to with Raymond Jansen.
oh
And from here, they traveled across town to the Exmoor Country Club, and then on to Glenview, and they went south. I'm here today with Hilda Williams, Little Fawn, Chief Thundercloud's daughter. We have been actually in Lake Forest area and Highland Park revisiting trail marker trees that Little Fawn's father posed by 70 years ago with Dr. Raymond Jansen. We actually revisited the one tree in Highland Park this morning, and now we're at the Discovery Museum next to the sculpture of the Native American trail marker tree.
I'm just impressed.
And it's been a special day for me being with Little Fawn, obviously, and to hear her tell me about her father, who was taught about the trail marker trees by his father, and then actually being at a location where we had the chance, I should say Little Fawn had the chance to stand where her father stood, and I stood where Dr. Raymond Jansen, the anthropologist who studied the trail trees for 12 years back in the 30s and 40s. So we took their place so we could carry on the tradition of both the Native Americans working with researchers. And
Great.
I'm very pleased.
I'm pleased too. Thank you.
That was very nice.
It's just touched my heart very well.
This trail marker tree is in Crystal Falls, Michigan, and was actually shaped at the request of the park designer. It was shaped in 1930. That's why it's smaller than a normal tree. And Earl and Christy Achawadigan are Native American historians. Earl's actually worked with the Smithsonian, and I visited up there and discussed this tree with him.
So tell me some of the hardships you faced in your journeys.
While researching the trail marker trees, you have to remember I was alone the majority of the time. I would only bring people back to unique sites after I located them. So one, you're usually sleeping in your truck. Usually it's fall or winter or the early March rainy seasons. I've been literally trapped in snowstorms for up to 3 days where you couldn't get out of the towns you were in. You're sleeping in your truck. But I learned to keep things, keep basic things in the truck. Extra sleeping bag, full Carhartts. So you're comfortable. But it's still strange. It's fun when you're with a bunch of people. It's never fun when you're trapped alone doing something. Swarms of mosquitoes. Early on, I would do it in the summer and spring a lot more. But the tick infestations, one of my friends, Brian, was bitten by several of these Lone Star ticks and was literally sick to the point where he had to have antibiotics by the time we got back from Missouri. I mean, there were literally hundreds of them on him when we got out of this one forest. And he was bitten several times, and you run into snakes. You had to remember you're by springs, creeks, and you're way back in the woods, and that's where there's more critters than. I'm not talking about hiking around parks, and little manicured areas. I'm going where no one goes, and trying to find the old paths and the old connections. You also run into a lot of colorful country folk. And luckily I get along with most of them, but you never know what they're protecting hundreds of acres or miles, miles back in the hills. All of a sudden they'll show up on a four-wheel with a shotgun across the top of their handlebars, and it's not hunting season. And so I always bring brochures and photographs of me and my research, and once they realize what I'm doing, it's usually okay. But it gets a little nerve-wracking when they're coming at you screaming, "What are you doing here?" And I try to get permission always if it's private property, but some of this public land backs up to different areas, so it's hard to tell where you're at. This is a directional trail marker tree that was located on the grounds of Fort Sheridan in Illinois, and the 5 horse soldiers that are posing in front of it. This photo was taken in 1897. This is a white oak trail marker tree that's located up in Traverse City, Michigan, and it's been well taken care of and protected by the community for decades. If you'd like to learn more about this fascinating part of Native American history, the name of the book is Native American Trail Marker Trees, Marking Paths Through the Wilderness, and it's published by Neil Samros.